Good morning, my friends. Today I'm covering some bad news. Nationwide, there is a police brutality insurrection, and it's covering two aspects of human life in America that are so disparate, and the media has not made any attempt to resolve our mutual conflict. In fact, they've made every attempt possible to divide and conquer the American society at large. But before I get covered in all the bad news and the burning of buildings and families being torn apart and crying and police authority expanding, I want to make it clear I am not part of any party. I am not part of any of the left and right distortion of thought. I'm here to tell you something that is coming from my intuition. And my intuition is telling me, and it's something really bad, and you're not going to like what I'm saying. We fucking deserve this. We deserve this. Everything that is happening in this country, both the left, the right, white, yellow, black, brown, whatever, we all deserve this. And it's not to do with just because of a person who died in under these really bad situations. George Floyd, the man who died, who said that this generation is lost. Was he just talking about one particular African American generation? Or was he talking about all the generations that are currently manifesting in the public square? Okay, you'll see what I mean as we go through this, but keep that in mind while I go through the media distortion here. All right, protests over police killing range. Protests over police killings range in dozens of U.S. cities. Tense protests. Okay, tense protests over the death of George Floyd and other police killings of Black people grew Saturday from New York to Tulsa to Los Angeles, with police cars set ablaze and reports of injuries mounting on all sides as the country convulsed through another night of unrest after months of coronavirus lockdowns. Remember, that's the background. That's the cultural theme now. Everything in the past has been dispensed. What it was in our past, the liberal or cultural tradition of freedom, the real classical liberalism that the Western culture tradition used to have, but because of the oligarchs, the technocratic elite, and the bankers and the two-bit politicians, they sold that out. They sold that out to retain power and continue to consolidate their own political agendas in the public square. Okay, so the new paradigm is coronavirus lockdowns. There's a real reason why these people, took advantage of the lockdown. We'll see why. The protest, which began in Minneapolis following Floyd's death Monday after a police officer pressed a knee on his neck until he stopped breathing, have left parts of the city a grid of broken windows, burned out buildings, and ransacked stores. The unrest has become a national phenomenon as protesters decry years of deaths at police hands. And, this is just setting the stage for something else. Watch, U.S. National Guard deployed as protests around the White House flare. The White House perimeter Saturday night swarmed with volatile demonstrators following a nationwide outcry over the killing of an unarmed 46-year-old Black man, George Floyd, by Officer Derek Chauvin, has been arrested and charged with third-degree murder and manslaughter. All right, and some people have gone to the White House to demonstrate. Barricades have fallen. The west of the White House. Okay, here's a tweet from Alejandro Alvarez. Barricades have fallen to the west of the White House, and the crowd is surging forward. Once again, coming face to face with Secret Service who've moved into formation and raised their riot shields. A few stained yellow from eggs. Let's watch this. Let's just watch this because it's important that we see what is unfolding. Right. And this is just one particular aspect. And I'm trying to help myself. I'm trying to stop myself from making a comment on every single facet of this. But the Black Lives Matter, all these other different types of political groups, they're working within a different type of philosophy and ideology. They believe in insurrection. They don't believe in revolution. I want to make this point very clear. There is two opposing sides, and they're not necessarily just in color and in race. They are coming from different political philosophies. One of them is the right-leaning political philosophy that believes strength in unity. And these people, the people in the right, they want to protect the state. They want to protect the structures of civil society, which happens to be businesses, banks, the public square. They really believe that buildings and the civil law is what keeps all of society afloat. I understand it. It doesn't mean I agree with it. Now, on the other left, we got the insurrectionists. The insurrectionalists, the people who want to overthrow civil society and rebel in all matters and form. So there's this ongoing conversation or discussion between people online saying, well, they're looters, they're rioters, they're destroying local businesses. And I believe Tim Pool also published a video where he talked about a businessman, a fireman in Minneapolis whose business was destroyed. And there's so much nuance in between all these different aspects of political philosophy that if you don't understand the crux of the idea, then you're going to think that people don't know what the fuck they're doing. I'm not justifying it. I'm not saying it. All I am saying in this point is that we need to outline it, understand it, contextualize it. So to begin, again, to continue, the left, they believe in insurrection. They believe in overthrowing the structures of power, and they believe power to be very different. And it doesn't manifest just the way that, the right-leaning people think it manifests. And so in these two camps, these political groups, these people will eventually unfold or descend on each other, not because they're trying to understand or begin something new. They're just trying to power and change their agenda. Some of them might be justified in trying to get their power. Others will be defending their unjustified power acquisition. It all depends on how the context works. Another thing, I started with this News Roundup podcast when I said we fucking deserve this, is because this goes so far beyond just a couple of, I hate to trivialize it this way, but the larger agenda of what is happening around the world is so massive and so beyond politics and race. And the reason it manifests in politics and in race is because the people in control, the technocratic elite, who are above beyond the Western cultural tradition of libertarianism, or in general with freedom-minded, democracy, actual universalized democracy, where authentic individuals can participate in the local community. They don't actually want that. The technocratic, whether it's a George Soros, whether it's a Bill Gates, or whether it's a Rockefeller, it does not matter. They have an supranational ideology that goes beyond these two particular camps. So a George Soros or a Bill Gates, these individuals, these comic supervillains, are not just complicit in inspiring conflict in the minds of man. No, the conflict is in our hearts and in our mind. Throughout these crises, every crisis that has happened in the past, we haven't actually resolved any of our differences. And the media has been complicit in pushing those half-truths so that misguided individuals get caught up in cul-de-sacs of thoughts and they don't move past that. And then they will say, well, they deserve it because they were out there doing stupid stuff. And that's how we're going to be debating back and forth. We're not going to actually look into anything else besides our own justification. All right, let's continue with this. Fox News crew chased, attacked by angry mob while reporting on protests outside White House. And remember, on my previous News Roundup podcast, I illustrated how a CNN reporter was arrested by the Minneapolis police. And to me, I made if you want to look into the previous News Roundup podcast, I'm looking for this video really quick as I speak. But if you remember, I had said that the suspicion of a CNN news reporter being calmly arrested in a live stream, to me, it just arises my suspicion. My suspicion is that there is a control mechanism that is surreptitiously being enabled and enacted by police departments, by politicians, and by all these other nefarious interests. And okay, before I get lost in what I am saying, there's a real reason why I'm saying this, but I'm trying to find that video. And if I don't find it, you're going to have to refer to my previous News Roundup podcast, because this is just coming off a script, off intuition, information. And if you need to look into it, you got the Google, you got the internet. I just want to show you all this other stuff that is happening. This one video right here in New York, this individual, African-American, his race, it really matters, right? He is discovering that there is a pile of bricks laid outside in the public square, neatly and organized for people to get going. This is a setup. This is a setup. And it's exactly a setup. And when people go outside and some of these individuals get caught up in that setup, oh, look, he's African-American and he's tossing bricks. Oh, my God, stop them. Send the police, send the army, send the military. We have to defend civil structures of society in order to preserve our way of life. Look, America is gone. All right. The idea of philosophy of libertarianism, it's gone. We're not even enjoying and embracing morality. We are so distorted in our own psychological images, we're not going to go outside of our own self to actually understand each other. So this is one of those things that we really need to pay attention and stop with our logical fallacies. In fact, we need to actually think with our mind, and compassion being part of it. Okay, so this might seem upsetting to some people that I am so charged with emotion, but there are so many times that I lay awake at night and think, when in the hell are we actually going to read a fucking book and discover the patterns of control? All right. Remember in the past, all these things that happened in Palestine, all these things that happened in Syria, all these things that happened in Egypt, all these things that happened in Central America and in Eurasia. It was so convenient as political theater, the left and the right. Oh no, they're terrorists. Oh no, they're freedom fighters. Oh no. But eventually we forgot. And the very same tactics that these bastards used on free human beings are being used in the New York Police Department. Israeli security operatives training police to control crowds. New York Police Department trained by Israeli security services on how to handle and control crowds. So the very same things that was being used in the past and externalized to other countries, like in Palestine, they're coming to us because we were too busy fighting with each other and not healing each other and not listening to each other. So this shit is ours now. We deserve this shit. It's very serious to me. I don't take it very lightly. And I'm just going to keep on going with the news. All right. This is what we should expect. There's just so much to it. This was the agenda all along. This is what they had prepared. This is what the Pentagon white paper simulation in 2001 talked about, how society was going to collapse by 2020, and that they had continuity of government ready to go and national security emergency procedures so that if any of these riots or crowds actually collapse the fucking government, they are ready to go. And don't even start with your fucking Trump, because it's all a king of debt, all right? No politician, no president, no one is gonna rescue or save us. It's up to us to revisit our psychological makeup and activate our moral compassion and consciousness to really do something meaningful, all right? And I'm sorry that if I attack somebody who people worship and idolize, but I don't care about politicians, I care about people. And the shit that's happening to people right now, this little girl being dragged into these Black Lives Matter protests, not understanding what it is all about, trauma, hurt, and this is her culture now. This is her part of society now. Children being involved in this. This is how bad things are. Yeah, we can blame the protesters. Yeah, we can blame the parents, but that's not the point I'm trying to make here. The point is that these children are seeing how corrupt and how disgusting the society is. That's the main issue. So stop your fucking hate rant right now. Think with your heart. Do you think this child deserves that? Whether you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, who cares? You think they deserve that? Question yourself. All right, we're going to continue on because we need to see all this stuff. And I've talked about this stuff and I said this to this stuff. And it doesn't even matter if you predicted, oh my God, I predicted it. No, read a fucking book, read a fucking white paper from these government parasites. You will find out what they actually think. Minneapolis. Please tell me, who's gonna take the guns? Who's gonna protect us? The police, the military, the National Guard? You fucking dumbass. You're not gonna actually do any goddamn fucking thing. They're just here to protect us and lock us down. And when they actually do lock us down and they lose control, guess what they're gonna call? The United Nations. And they're shooting paintballs at the people standing outside of their stoop. They're standing outside of their porch. Because they're dangerous. Individuals cannot be trusted. Only the state can be trusted and nothing else. Only individuals can be trusted. Meanwhile, individuals irrationally acting with violence and in the moment of the crowd. Remember, once you're in a crowd, there is no room for reason. So it's not even a matter of like, oh, well, this person did this, the other person did that. No, once you start getting embroiled in a crowd that is full of passion, the unconscious, irrational momentum of that will carry over. And then there are events in these situations where people will actually fight and hurt each other, like this. Now imagine if these people were doing something beyond hurting and beating each other up. That would be a great idea. And I'm going to stop my emotional, passionate rant here because we're not getting much information. And, we're seeing the ugly truth of things that are happening right before our eyes. And it's hard not to get emotional and passionate because it's like this is something that we should not allow anywhere. And I've been protesting and demonstrating about these things ever since 2012, and even before then. Hands off Syria, impeach Obama, all these other things. I've done it. And not because I was a bleeding heart. No, because I knew that eventually these things, these corruptions, these political corruptions will emanate in different form and fashion, and they will come to our door. And that's exactly what is happening. And it's just basically, it's part of the plan. It's part of the agenda. Let's continue with the news. All right, George Floyd protests updates. Police arrest almost 1,700 people across 22 cities in 3 days. The death of George Floyd, a black man seen in video pinned down. All right, let's go down to see what are the updates. 7:38 a.m., Richmond police investigating shooting incident during protest. 6:35 a.m., 3:45, people arrested in New York City on Saturday amid protest. 33 officers injured. 6:05 a.m., police have arrested at least 1,669 people in 22 U.S. cities in the past 3 days. Mass incarceration, mass lockdowns. Remember, this is just another key facet of their control. 5:57 a.m., at least one killed in an Indianapolis shooting amid protest. 4:32 a.m., 28 arrested in Nashville. Horses used to back crowd away from precinct. So this just happened recently. If you're listening to this emotional conversation, then this is just occurring on Sunday. This is Sunday morning, and as you can see, I just woke up and got ready to go, and this is what I'm looking at, and this is the previous events. This is how fast this is moving. Remember, once the irrational crowd in conjunction with the political corruption, the framework, the cultural background will just be a momentum of its own, and it will build and grow, and it will take a life on its own. And the people who started this or initiated these demonstrations, they have lives. They're individuals. They might drop out, they might continue, they might do something else, but eventually that momentum will carry over, and that power, will be there to be used to some other political end. We frustrate ourselves. We were filled with existential dread. We're gonna die. Invisible enemy. Be afraid. Oh my God. Don't trust other people. Do not trust other people. Do not try to collaborate with other people. Do not try to actually befriend the other. No. Stay indoors. Be afraid. So when the next actual full-on insurrection or revolution or boogaloo or whatever you want to call it, no one is actually going to help each other, and no one's actually going to build each other up. No, we got the fear and we got the anger ready to go. Let these pantomimes figure it out in the public square. Meanwhile, the oligarchic technocratic elite take over society in a meaningful way. They put their money in the right places. They wait for society to collapse, and then they buy it all up. All right. Officer suffers broken arm after being run over while trying to stop looters in Old City, Philadelphia police say. All right, this is what the Philadelphia police say. Officers was attempting to stop District 9 bike officer individual was trying to stop individuals in a vehicle who were involved in looting a business in the area of 7th and Chestnut. The individual ran over the officer while escaping the officer, currently stable at Jefferson Hospital. Yes, the fury and the anger and the unresolved conflict between the people and the policy enforcement department will continue. And it's like we never got a resolution. Never. Everything was just kind of sidelined to later. And the families that were part of the whole tragedy, they're still suffering, and there is no real meaningful solution. Okay, update. Security officers gunned down at Oakland Federal Building. DHS officials call gunman an assassin. So this is the beginning of a massive insurrection and revolution, a civil war. And this country is balkanized. It's no longer a federalized union. No, we're going to retreat into a federation of sub-blocks in which different coasts, the East Coast, the West Coast, South and the North and Middle of America, will all have their own particular political bent and culture and are not going to be in a unified state, which is such great news for the people who are going to come and take it all over. All right. Oakland. As tension begins to soar on the streets of Oakland Friday night, a gunman opened fire on two Federal Protective Service officers posted at the city's federal building, killing one of them and sending the other to the hospital with critical injuries. In a statement to KPX5, the FBI said the incident occurred at around 9:45 p.m. A vehicle approached the building. The statement read, an individual inside the vehicle began firing shots at contracted security officers for the Federal Protection Service at the Department of Homeland Security. One officer was killed and another injured. The Oakland police tweeted Friday night that they did not believe the shooting was related to the violence that would later break out on the nearby streets during a demonstration sparked by police custody death of George Floyd. Okay, as of late, we have witnessed an outright assault on our law enforcement community. Last night in Oakland, California, an assassin cowardly shot two Federal Protective Service contractors as they stood watch over a protest. One officer was killed, the other is in critical condition. Let me express my deepest condolences. When someone targets a police officer or a police station with the intention to do harm and intimidate, that is an act of domestic terrorism. Fighting terrorism was the very reason for the founding of the Department of Homeland Security. And I said earlier, we will stand behind our law enforcement. Oh my God, the irony and the beautiful poetry in that quote. It evinces the whole agenda in that half-truth, misguided statement. Of course, they're an official, they have a narrative, they have an agenda to push, but remember, Homeland Security was introduced to prevent terrorism, and somebody's terrorist is another person's freedom fighter. So these people who were in the Department of Homeland Security, they instituted a culture of paranoia, and they handed out booklets and pamphlets to stores and buildings and movie theaters and malls, and telling them to watch out for people who use cash, people who question the government, people who don't go along with what everyone else is saying, and they need to be reported and they need to be tracked. And so that is how this started. It started with a culture of fear and paranoia and our mutual consent. That's why we deserve this. Because we had so many years, we had so much false prosperity at the expense of other countries. All right, that's the literal fact of this. We were sucking up all the cheap dollars and sucking up all the prosperity around the world because this economy is over finalized. We're not actually producing anything. We just rig the economy and take what other people are producing at a discount. And this helps to numb us into a sense of false security, a normalcy bias. And with all this floating cash, all this money, all these agendas of terror and stuff, we need to put the money somewhere, right? So let's put it into militarizing the police. I've covered this and I've talked to this and my friends. And, before I had my current blog right here or video channel, I had a website called politicalscams.me. 2010, 2012, 2013, 2014, around that area, I was actively pursuing these stories where the police was getting these tools of oppression from the military as a Department of Homeland Security program meant to keep us safe from terrorists. And I knew beforehand that these tools of oppression were not here to keep us safe, because if they were here to keep us safe, we would have already gotten rid of the Federal Reserve and, so they're used now against us, whether I predicted it or not. It doesn't matter. It doesn't take a genius. You can see, the government will use any convenient tool of oppression to continue clamping down on power. All right, let's continue with the news. Then we have ideologues like Mr. Van Jones. Even the most well-known, even the most well-intentioned white person has a virus in his or her brain. So let's listen to this intelligent individual who is knowingly dividing this country.
It's not the racist white person who's in the Ku Klux Klan that we have to worry about. It's the white liberal Hillary Clinton supporter walking her dog in Central Park who would tell you right now, people like that, oh, I don't see race. Race is no big deal to me. I see us all as the same. I give to charities. But the minute she sees a black man who she does not respect or who she has a slight thought against, she weaponized race like she had been trained by the Aryan Nation. A Klans member could not have been better trained to pick up the police and pick up her phone and tell the police it's a black man, African American man, come get him. So even the most liberal, well-intentioned white person has a virus in his or her brain that can be activated at an instant.
Yes, and for me, that virus is a psychological malfunction that derives from unresolved personal conflict and a cultural narrative which sublimates individual resolve at the expense of integrity, virtue. And then there is the parasitical Madison Avenue who hijacked the gangster culture. If you actually research what 90s hip hop was all about, and even before that, 90s hip hop was about family. It's about protecting your community. It's about being a man. And the MTV, Madison Avenue corporate bastards, they hijacked, co-opted, took over that cultural subculture and destroyed it and gave it to the grinder audience so that, showcasing all this madness to click people into it. And yes, Van Jones, I can agree with him. I have had situations in which I am walking in the middle of the street and I don't look like I live in North Carolina. There is some people who are necessarily racist by their historical development as individuals, and they haven't actually questioned their own resolve and done anything about it, so they project their ignorance onto me, and that happens. But let's be honest, though, it's not a white, black, brown thing, though. I've been in different places with different people, and ultimately we are tribal people who choose not to embrace the other because we're afraid and unwilling to discover what it means to be an other. And this is why I say someone like Van Jones could be very divisive because, a virus, it's an unseen, invisible enemy. And, the white lady, the owl, the old white lady, as some people routinely call them, they're a dying generation. They're passing by. They're gone. It's up to us to decide what we're going to do and how we're going to react to this. And, personally, individually, me, my family, my friends, I'm telling them everything I need to know, they need to know. And I'm not imploring their hearts with fire of hate or, distrust. Okay, so the George Floyd death and protests, they have gone nationwide. These things are hard to keep in updated with, but it's happening all over in Colorado, California, Georgia, Kentucky, Minnesota, Missouri, Ohio, Tennessee, Texas, Utah, Washington, and Wisconsin have all activated their state and national guards to maintain order, assist police, and stop violence, governors, and state officials. Yeah. All right. And remember how I was mentioning before, there were some videos of mine you can look into where I talked about the Corona lockdown and the impending economic consolidation of the country. And I had implored people to get into the habit of finding ways to prepare themselves in either stocking some food items or keeping contact with their friends and family or obtaining tools of liberation. Hint, hint, hint. So those things, let's keep that in mind as this updates and these new things happen. Let's keep ourselves prepared in real meaningful ways. Let's not act or react with fear or hate, because if we do, we're taking time and energy from the real sense of the word, from the now, to actually prepare. If you want to do something meaningful, forget the protests, forget the politicians, totally forget this country too, because all those are abstract vagaries that are no longer mean what they mean. You need to stick to what is real: your life, your family, your friends, your community, your local environment, and do everything possible to create a conspiracy with this localized network of individuals that you trust and rely, and use all the methods available that are peaceful and meaningful and not proactively violent. Why? Okay, people will poo-poo on peaceful, meaningful solutions, but no, peaceful, meaningful solutions, they're very hard and they take a lot of work, but they actually do something. So, keep that in mind. Shocking moment, Dallas rioters hurled rocks at business owners who tried to defend his store with a sword, then brutally beat him unconscious during night of violence in the city. So as the structures of civil authority are collapsing, people are complaining in the left, private business ownership, people actually choosing to protect local businesses and the like as being part of the problem, as being complicit in this everything. And again, it is all going down to a difference of ideology. That very same virus that Von Jones talked about is the virus of ideology. You see what I mean? You see how this is not necessarily just a race political thing? It's a virus of ideological proportions. And because people are so entrenched in their reality tunnel, they are unwilling to let go of that. To let go of your reality tunnel is akin to death. To some people, it is akin to death because it creates this emotional physiological reaction in them. It's a fear response, and it's like, no, I just can't. These people are wrong. They're wrong, and I know through my self-righteous hate that they're wrong, and that's just the way it is. All right. NYPD officer rams into crowd of George Floyd protesters in Brooklyn. Police against the people, people against police, people against people. And this because we chose not to resolve our issues. Perhaps we don't hate each other. Perhaps we just focus our hate on the police. But the police are people. Police are individuals wearing a costume, adopting an ideology for a paycheck. Yeah, there might be heroes in some communities. Yeah, there might be virtuous individuals here and there. But when they're afraid and they're scared, they're going to act like this. And that's just the way it is. All right. Okay, let's continue. Because there is one last thing that I want to talk about, and it is so important because it just kind of talks. There's a couple of things that I want to talk about, but I'm going to focus on this one before so that we don't lose track of the information while we're getting riled up in our emotions. And remember that it does not take a genius. It does not take some guy with a crazy hair to tell you that the tools of oppression that you support today are going to be used against you tomorrow. And in the lockdown crisis scenario where everyone was deathly afraid of an invisible enemy, an unknowable virus, we were told that there will be developed tools of contact tracing, applications on our phone that we can be traced, and they will notify us if we have been infected with some virus or disease. And, oh my God, it's so helpful. It's going to be great. We're really going to control this virus. So now let's see what these parasitic bastards are planning to do.
John, want to talk about that?
Yeah, talk about that, please. Please tell us.
As we've begun making arrests, we have begun analyzing the data of who we've arrested and begun actually doing what you would think is almost very similar to our COVID. It's contact tracing. Who are they associated with? What platforms are they advocating for? And we have seen things like white supremacist organizers who have posted things on platforms about coming to Minnesota. We're checking to see do the folks that we have made arrests on and that we have information, are they connected to those platforms? We have seen flyers about protests where folks have talked about they're going to get their loot on tonight. And we're checking to see, are they part of an organized criminal organization? And if so, what is that organization and how are they organized? We have been working with both our state, our county, our local, and our federal partners to start looking at issues around, is this organized crime? Is this an organized cell of terror? Where do these folks, where's the linkage is what we're doing. And so we are in the process right now of building that information network, building that intel effort so that we can link these folks together, figure out what the organizations that have created this, and then just understand how do we go after them.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. White supremacists and Black Lives Matter, they're, oh my God, they're extremist people. We need to institute a database program of some sort to trace everyone and find out what their real opinions are. It's not like we were doing that for years on years. I know this is just the state of Minneapolis and stuff. I know this is just one politician, but once you start a cultural shift based on a pathology of fear and the power of nightmares, then you eventually just limit your options in the future and are left with the tools of oppression and irrationality and ignorance and anger and hate. And then you'll have politicians who will offer convenient, immediate political solutions that will just, they might put order back in a couple of short terms, but eventually, that's not going to resolve our major issues. And our major issues is that we create our own epoch, we create our own political order, we create our own set of lives and standards, and how we treat and relate with others is how we actually create a different cultural society. In the right, people will call it the 3%ers or the 5%ers, or they will say there's a active minority that culturally shifts the agenda to something much greater for the majority. That's cute and that's fine, but as for me, an individual who is something beyond just the virus or the specter of ideology, I can tell you that, look, life is so infinite and spontaneous, and the natural order of things is based on natural law. Well, what is natural law? Natural law meaning like the cause and effect, the real sense of order in this universal cosmic perspective. And in that, we are internal and we're also spontaneous, but we have freedom. We have freedom of mind, we have freedom of will, all these different things. And you can get biblical or you can get philosophical or existential, whichever particular philosophy or way of looking at this helps you. But I think this quote is only important for us to, again, look into. Consciousness can only exist through continued recognition of the unconscious, just as everything that lives must pass through many deaths. So how Van Jones was talking about the old white lady with her unconscious racism, that's what he was hinting at, the unconscious racism present in people. But in my opinion, it's an unconscious fear of the self and the other, and a misunderstanding of what it is to be human and the actual laws of the world and the nature around us. And because we're so institutionalized and domesticated by cultural programming and the state and things like that, we just take it for granted and think like, oh, well, there's somebody else who's going to take care of it. We all have to consent. We'll just vote. We get into it together in groups. Things will change. And if we make enough demands, there will be enough pressure and resistance. And then eventually, our change will be given to us. Well, we live in a new model of control. It's called a techno-tyranny model of control. I've written about this before. And the important part about it is that the techno-tyranny of control is going to sublimate the old average personas of people. The role playing we did in the past of the artificial economy we had is no longer needed. There's no need for all these customer service people. There's no need for humans anymore. We live in a post-human, post-information age. So what we actually see in our screen is just a simulation meant to elicit a response from us, because eventually we are going to participate in our own demise. And that is the problem here. We are a divided country struggling with confusion, fear, and freedom. And there is so much data that shows the growing division between parties, between people. And, this is just deepening and getting a little bit out of hand. And it has to do with the emotional driven complexes of people, their lack of philosophy. Anyway, so I am really going to be looking at this from that perspective. However, the silver lining on where I'm coming from, I know you've witnessed a big emotional tantrum here, but it's important for us to be okay with them allowing ourselves with expressing these emotions. We have to get them out, or else we're just going to retain them, and we're just going to become more neurotic and corrupt, and we were going to be thinking that we're powerless. There's so many things we can do, and the platforms of control in social media are becoming more authoritarian, more Orwellian. They're not going to allow for all these other types of dissension in the control platform. So if you want a solution, I personally recommend that you create an account at hive.blog. Hive.blog is a decentralized blockchain where you take responsibility of your content, your login, your keys, and The reason that I'm suggesting it today right now is because there's these platforms are closing down and clamping down. We have to find different ones where we're going to communicate, collaborate, and conspire with one another outside of the state's control. And I've had tutorials in this YouTube channel if you're interested, and I've had other types of solutions. So remember, the solution is much more to do with us and very little to do with political agendas, crowds getting angry and hurting other people and destroying buildings. Yes, there's a philosophical reasoning, and yes, people do get upset and they don't have a way to expressing themselves. That's definitely granted and understandable, but we have to be sophisticated and nuanced in the way we approach this, because the technocratic elite, they are way ahead of us and they're not necessarily waiting for us to catch up. And we should have been catching up during this lockdown crisis pandemic by embracing our humanity, researching, and helping one another. This is your friend, Hector Combo. I know today I went kind of crazy with all my ranting and rambling, but I think there was a worthwhile event right here between you and me. It was very intimate, spontaneous, and true. And I hope that that touches you in a very special way. And I don't mean that in that way. I hope it means in a really sensible way. This is your friend Hector Combo. Until then, reminding you to keep it cool, keep a peace of mind. The presence of mind, the peace of mind that you have today is victory. That is going to be the fuel that you will use to liberate yourself. Do not use hate, anger, and despair as fuel to break you out of this dialectic. No, use the presence of mind, the peace of heart, and compassion to move beyond this dialectic of control. And eventually, time will grant you all of your wishes. Remember, time is the only time is the only taker. So that's the only thing we have. Don't despair. Don't waste it with despair. This is your friend Hector, finally leaving. Until then, bye-bye.